Welcome to the Immigration Museum. Folks, we have with us this afternoon Joyce Barry. Joyce was the first woman to drive trams in Melbourne back in 1975. We'll find out more in a minute there. And we've got Malcolm Just with us, the famous tram poet, Mel, from South Melbourne Tram Depot in the early 1990s. Okay, Joyce, g'day. Welcome aboard. We've just taken Joyce on a tour of the Trammies exhibition, which is on here at the Immigration Museum upstairs. Joyce features in the exhibition, and when we've been taking people on tours through the exhibition there, we've sort of highlighted the fact that women went tram driving for the first time in Melbourne in 1975. In fact, I think we've got it to
73.
73 you've got it as. Okay, so welcome, Joyce. Joyce, do you want to tell us what depots you worked at and when you started in the tramways as just the first port of call for us?
The first port of call was Brunswick Depot, and I was there for 18 and a half years, and from there I went into the city on the safety zones because I'd hurt my leg rather badly.
Yes.
And
through work?
Accident on the tram, or?
It was an accident on the tram, actual.
Yes.
And I did finish up losing my knee.
Ah.
But
Gee, and you stayed on driving trams then?
No, I was still a near Connie.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And it was about 3 years later I had an operation on my knee, and I went back as a Connie.
Yes.
Then from there I went after 3 years I tried and went as a driver on the trams.
Joyce, you started in the year of the Olympic Games, when the Olympic Games came to Melbourne.
Yes.
Any memories at all that stand out there?
My word, there are.
Any you want to share with us at all?
Well, some of them are funny.
Yes.
But I had a woman come up to me with a little boy, and he was distressed, and she said to me, please, quick. Ooh. And it was the actions for somebody for the toilet.
Yes, okay.
And I just grabbed the little boy by the hand and ran across Swanson Street amongst the traffic, leaving Mum behind.
Yes.
And we made it into the toilets at Collins Street.
So a conductor taking the son of a mother to the toilets, that shows, Malcolm's often shared this theme with me, that there was a great trust in tram conductors. People would leave their young kids with conductors to be met at the other end of the line, perhaps by if they were going off to visit a cousin or friends or whatever, and there was that sort of element of trust in the earlier days where you'd leave someone with the connies.
Didn't parents say that if you ever get lost, go to a policeman or go to a conductor? Wasn't that the feeling in those days?
That's right. That's right. Now, there was a friendliness and honesty more of what we were able to do. For instance, one of them was a little girl came to me in 1992, I think it was, and she asked how could she get to Burwood. And I said, now it all depends what part of Burwood you want. And she told me where she wanted to go and what it was for. And I took her along to a policeman and found out what she wanted to do, and then we took her back to the tram and made sure that she had the right tram. And a few days later, her mother came to me on the safety zone and thanked me.
Yes. So a wonderful community sort of spirit with the Trammies, the Melbourne people, the visitors to the Olympic Games, or whoever else was coming in for grand finals or test cricket matches or whatever, because really Trammies are centrally located in whatever's going on in the city, really.
That's right.
And what was it like dealing with all the overseas visitors during the Olympic Games?
Very interesting. When I say that, there's two things that stick in my mind. One was a beautifully dressed Indian came up to me and he said, "Where's your public bars? Where's your public bars?" And I said, "I'm sorry, I can't get you."
Yes.
And I got my pen and paper out and public baths.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
they're up the top of the city.
Yes. Yes.
But he came back days later and thanked me.
Yes.
And then there was a lady in similar circumstances, and she wanted the baths. And I said, "Oh, not again, not again."
Mm-hmm.
And she said, what do you mean, not again?" And I said, "Well, there's a man asked me this question 3 days ago." And I said, "I still haven't forgotten him." And I said, "I think he got up to the baths all right." And she said, "That was my husband." So it was more or less all the time coming and going.
Yes. Joyce, what shifts did you prefer doing? Just to give people a little bit of an insight into the depot life, the life of a trammie in that era. Were you an early shift woman, broken shift, lates?
Broken shifts mainly.
Uh-huh. And what was it sort of like? You'd be starting work 6:30, 7 o'clock?
Yes. Yes, about 7 o'clock you'd do broken shifts. You'd go off at 11 and come back on again about 2:30, 3 o'clock.
And what would you do in the meantime, in the lunch break?
Go home and do work.
How far did you live from your work?
About 10 minutes drive.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yes, I used to like doing brokens as well. So you can go off and do the things that you like doing.
During the break, I did my fair share of brokens as well. Joyce, you saw a period in the tram depots when, after the Second World War and well into the 1950s, lots of different new communities of people were starting to work in the tramways. Any memories there? Brunswick, I think you would have probably got quite a few Italians starting to work there, perhaps some of the Greeks as well. Any recollections of that changing phase of the tramways there?
Yes, but you didn't meet up with them so much then. It was a couple of years later when Risson was in power.
Yes.
He made a club, and I think it was run from Q Depot, and gradually he brought them together.
Yes.
But to say anything specific about anyone, I wouldn't say anything.
Mm-hmm.
They were quite good friends to me, and I made quite a good lot of friends out of them.
Talking about Risson, you met Sir Robert Risson on a number of occasions.
Yes.
Can you give us a quick description of the man before we go into some details? In that Sir Robert Risen ran the Tramway Board between 1949 and 1970. He was a very prominent figure in the Melbourne landscape, if you like.
Yes. One thing that he did for us, when we got the driving through, we had to climb up on the top of a tram. And he came into Collins Street, and as the trams came in, if they had a woman on them, he went up and put the pole right.
Is that right?
And the union delegate come along and, "What are you doing up there?" "I'm minding my business." And he said, "What do you mean you're minding your business?" He said, "Just what I said, I'm minding my business." And he got down off the top of the tram, and this smart-ass union delegate ran the trams in. And Risen had him called into the office and said, "I was doing something that was my business, and I'm not going to stand for any more of this tomfoolery. You go back to the depot and get your tram out, and that's it." And I believe that was the final showdown of the men not wanting the women on the trams.
Yes.
But really, I can't see any justification for what went on.
Joyce, we were talking about Risen, Robert Risen. You met him on a number of occasions?
Several occasions,
Several
yes.
occasions. In at the headquarters at 616 Little Collins Street?
Yes.
Talking about Major General Sir Robert Risen, he'd served as a Major General in different theatres. I think I've read where he served in Burma.
That's right.
He took over the running of the Melbourne Metropolitan Tramway Board in 1949. Was very much a man where, discipline was an important part of daily life.
Yes.
But he seemed to be conscious to bring all the new communities of tramway workers together. You were talking about a club that he formed at Kew Depot that perhaps was to integrate the new Greek Trammies, the new Italian Trammies. He was conscious that the tramway family had to be harmonious.
Yes.
Any memories there at all?
Quite a few. He came over to Wattle Park because he lived in the street opposite the park,
Yes.
and he played a game of tennis.
Yes.
When he'd finished the game of tennis, he said, "Now you can do as good as I am." He said, "You can be a good tennis player too."
Yes.
And it went from Wattle Park. It then became more or less all the depots had tennis teams. And I can remember going out to Wattle Park to play, and the first thing he said to me, "Hello, Barry."
So he knew everybody's names.
He knew people's names?
He knew
Yes.
people's names.
He knew me from trying to get the tramway
The women to drive trams?
yes.
Yes. Yep.
Yes, he was all for it.
Yes.
And
When you talked to me on the phone, Joyce, you had fond memories of Robert Risen. You said that he was a good man. You felt he was a good man.
that's right.
And, in the history of our tramways here, Robert Risen is looked at as a person that held the Melbourne tramways together, and one of the main reasons why we've got trams is due to Sir Robert Risen's advocacy, pro-tram advocacy, right the way
Yes.
through that period.
That's right.
Any memories in that area of, a pro-tram, Robert Risen?
No, he came out to Brunswick and he travelled along on the inside of the tram.
Yes.
And then he came and stood beside me coming back down the road. And he said, "Have you got any complaints?" And I said, "Oh, many that we won't go into." I said, "There's a lot of selfish people still around." And he asked me a few more questions, and then he got off down Sydney Road. And when I was coming back out from the city, he got on my tram again. He said, "Who specifically was that man that was annoying you?" And I said, "Oh, that was the conductor I had that day." And he said, "No, what was his name?" And I told him, and he said to me, "Well, we'll be fixing that matter up." And a few days later, sure enough, there was the driver, the Connie rather, got on the tram, and I stepped off to know what I had to do. And after a few minutes, he came and knocked on the door. He says, "Come on, we're together." And I said, "I'm just making sure that I'm together." And I didn't know, but Risson was in the depot,
Yes.
watching to see what was going on.
Wow. He then caught trams all the time. Now, this is strange. In a modern day context, you rarely get chief executives, CEOs, senior management using, it's one of our complaints, they don't use the tramways, but yet they're managing the tramways. And that's a very strange side of modern life, a management that's almost detached from being on the shop floor. In Rissen's case, he was often getting around on the trams then, Joyce. You often saw Robert Risen travelling trams?
Yes. Yes, and having a conversation, getting up on the front of the tram and having a conversation with the driver.
So
You're finding out what the problems were and fixing them. Yes.
So you jump up into the driver's cabin,
Yes.
run along and chat for a few stops and then hop off. So what, with his bowler hat and
Yes, it's Homburg hat.
Homburg hat? Okay, it's very interesting. Joyce, just skipping around a little bit, did you have a favourite tram line?
Yes, Brunswick to the city.
Brunswick to the city, Sydney Road? Now, isn't it interesting?
Now, why did you like that one?
Yes.
Because it was busy.
Okay.
As a conductor, it was busy.
As a driver.
As a driver. And you like the busy runs.
Yes.
W-class trams, Joyce?
Yes.
I've been told that Brunswick Depot had most of the Clyde controller trams, most of the W's built in the 1930s, which were quite fast. Do you remember, I don't know, Malcolm, you remember the Clyde controllers? Oof, gee, they could move. What's your memory? You get into a nice Clyde 729 or something and car out the back at Brunswick Depot and head down into the city?
Yes, it was quite an interesting life. Matter of fact, I'd go back to it tomorrow.
Yes, fantastic, Joyce. I love it. Love it.
When you were driving, did the passengers sort of annoy you by stopping at the wrong, ringing the bell too late for the stops and things like that? Were passengers? Some drivers think passengers are an annoyance and they would prefer just to drive.
No, I wouldn't say that. I'd say that they were just interested in having a woman driver.
Yes.
They all noted it, did they?
Excuse me.
Yeah, no worries.
No, I think 90% of them took it that we were driving and that was it.
Yes.
Tell me, when you were a conductress, what was the biggest take that you used to have on a day?
How much did you collect, Joyce? And you saw decimal currency change as well.
How much do you think you would take on a busy shift?
Well, the record still stands in Brunswick.
Yes.
Yes.
It was taken by a girl doing a Sunday afternoon shift.
Sunday after.
She took £408.
God, crikey, £408 working Sydney Road
Yes,
on
from
a Sunday afternoon. Now, you would have thought the patronage levels would have been a little bit
No,
lower.
on the contrary, it would be higher.
Because everyone was using the trams.
Fewer people had cars. Mm-hmm. And how much would the average ticket be at that time?
sixpence.
Sixpence.
£408.
What was how could she carry the bag? At that time, did they have the bags had the harness on either side, or did the women have the
Had to strap across the shoulder.
same as the men? Because later on they brought in the harness, didn't they?
Yes.
As a result of that. Can you imagine the weight of that? But a good conductor, of course, he tried to get rid of most of that and turn it into notes.
And turned into notes, yes.
If you could. Because you wouldn't want to be carrying all those pennies, would you?
She had 2 trips in the depot unloading her money.
Crikey. 2 trips in the depot. Did you see a conductor in your day actually used to fill out a journal
Yes,
when you were finished on the down and you were changing to the up?
that's right.
And you had a little clipboard in the corner of the tram, or you had a little paper clip of some sort, and you had to leave the bits of paper there, and the inspector would come in and check off that. Is that right? Can you give us a...
Not quite right.
Uh-huh.
You only put a paper up in the clip when you were relieving.
Yes.
You didn't put them up just any haphazard way.
Okay.
But
It was to give the next conductor an idea what ticket numbers were out and about in the tram.
that's right.
Yes. Okay. Decimal currency change. You went from pounds, pence, shillings, threepences, etc., and you changed over to dollar and cents.
Yeah,
Interesting period.
very, very interesting. Some of the people had threepence halfpenny in their hand.
Yes.
They wanted a halfpenny change.
Yes.
And we'd say, you can't have the decimal currency, you've got to take the other currency. Oh, but this, and this. And we finished up, we had a depot meeting, and we decided that we'd only handle the sterling. We wouldn't handle the decimal currency. And we had hell to play.
You decided at a depot meeting to stick with the older version of money.
And you were supposed to be carrying both currencies.
Both currencies?
Yeah.
Wow,
Oh.
now there's a nice bit of good old-fashioned confusion.
Because
for
everybody
us.
would have been confused. Everybody would be trying to work out, sort of what it was in dollars and cents and what
Yes.
it was in the past. And there'd be so many arguments.
There were sure arguments.
And how long was the transition period?
12 months.
Oh, God.
Gee, okay. So you, as a connie, you carried both currencies for 12 months.
Yeah.
Wow, long period of transition. Joyce, any recollections of any of the eccentric conductors? Did you ever meet Frenchie, the fellow that used to juggle and carry, as you, I think
No.
you said once, crackers in his bag or something or other?
I can remember the man because I was on the tram coming up St Kilda Road, and he was conning the tram, and this little boy said to me, "Oh, here's my favourite conductor again."
Yes, yes.
And he had his money in his hand and a cracker in it.
Right.
And he said, "I can't light this up, it won't light." And I said, "Well, just give it to me here for a minute." And I asked a man if he had a cigarette lighter, and I lit it, and I said, "Here, quick." Threw it at him. And he wondered what was coming. Afterwards he said to me, "You gave me a bloody fright."
It'd have to be a little Tom Thumb, I would imagine. Those are little Tom Thumbs. At Brunswick or at North Fitzroy, any memories of some of the characters? They could have been a driver or a conductor, but of course there's more of a chance to be a character as a conductor in a way because you're out in amongst the locals. Mm-hmm. Anyone that stands out at all for you? Dominic on Sydney Road, or any of the girls that were a bit eccentric perhaps?
No. I think they were down-to-earth Connies.
Yes?
They just were down-to-earth.
Were they in it for the long haul? Most people who took a job on the trams, were they in it for their working life, or did they see it as just a job that they took for 5 years?
I think most of the girls that came on to get the extra money.
Yes.
The few girls that were on had the life expectancy, and they more or less treated the job as a serious job.
Yes.
But it's very hard to know the difference.
We would put Joyce Barry then in that category of people that treated it as a life job. You look like you've had a wonderful time in the tramways.
Yep.
You quipped Joyce that you'd go back even these days if you had a chance, eh?
If I had a chance.
Mm-hmm. Now, you were the first woman to drive trams in Melbourne, or a tram. And you were saying that was in 1973. Now, what was that build-up period like? You mentioned to us that you first went to see Robert Risen, and perhaps you took a group of women to see him, or you went by yourself in 1956?
We went as a group in 1956 of women that definitely wanted to go driving.
Yes.
Just from Brunswick Depot?
That was just from Brunswick Depot.
Okay.
And I think there's a photograph of us there. There's 16 girls in Risen.
Okay.
And that was the finish of that. We then went through to 1970, and we had a big what would you call it, demonstration.
Yes.
And from that we got a little bit of help, and then that was the year that the Women's International Lobby came into it.
Yes.
And with their help we got the resolution rescinded. Now I think there was about 16 or 20 girls went to the meeting at Collingwood Town Hall where we got that meeting rescinded, and it was more or less the end of things.
Now, Malcolm and I have seen a tramway stop work meeting at a variety of town halls. I saw them at Brunswick Town Hall over the conductors' issues largely, Brunswick Town Hall, Collingwood Town Hall were two, and Richmond Town Hall. In fact, we also went there. Those meetings at the town halls could be fairly lively.
Yeah.
They could be bloody lively. You got any recollections of that big meeting to rescind a resolution that had been on the Tramway Union books, by the sounds of things, for quite a number of years, that our understanding is forbade men to train women as drivers. That was the crux of the resolution. That's what stopped women going driving. Was it a fiery meeting, Joyce? What happened at Collingwood Town Hall?
Very fiery meeting. Very fiery. In fact, one man picked a girl up and was going to put her over the balcony.
Crikey.
It was quite a fiery meeting.
Joyce,
How did you change their minds? Because most of the men would have had to vote against the resolution, or to rescind that resolution. So what arguments did you use?
Yes.
I really don't remember it now.
Because obviously the majority of the men did decide in the end to vote to rescind that motion.
I've got that lined in red.
Yes. Do you want us to read that, Joyce?
Yes, if you would.
It says here, this is a Tramway Record magazine from November 1975. So it's in 75 when lots of this actions happened. And it states, issues discussed at stop work meeting, the Secretary stated that there had been some talk that this stop work meeting was called on the issue, but was only a front to bring forward the question of women drivers, and said that this was a lie. This meeting was called under direct instructions of our members at the previous stop work meeting on the 4th of July 1975. Now this looks like it's largely a little bit of logistics through, because the temperature was up at that stage, I would imagine. It was red hot. It was close to women becoming tram drivers. There was probably a lot of community pressure. There may have even been the emerging feminism of the days as well, where women were fighting for equal parity in wages and conditions, etc. What I think might be interesting to look at, and we can scan in on, is some of the newspaper articles. For instance, Joyce, here it says in the Advertiser on Thursday, January the 8th, 1976, now this is after women have been driving, and it states there, Melbourne, half of Melbourne's male tram drivers are still opposed to women doing their job. That is an estimate of Joyce Barry, the first woman to qualify as a tram driver. Driver Barry, 52, a former conductor, has said yesterday she and other women drivers were insulted regularly by male colleagues.
What sort of insult? What would they say to you?
Oh, all sorts of different things. I had just had an operation, and I'd come back to work, and I was a marmalade.
Yes.
And you know how you used to stand and watch the sign-on sheet for anybody that was late?
Yes.
And one of these chaps come along and he says, oh, you're more a male than a female anyhow. I said, what do you mean? He said, the operation you had. I said, the operation had nothing to do with being a male or a female.
Yes.
I said, you'd like to come in and talk to the boss?
Yes.
And, oh, get lost, he said. Anyhow, a couple of days later, he come at me again, and I said, we'll go into the boss this time. And I took him into the boss, and I said, this is the chappie that I told you about the other day that was detrimental to the women. And he said, you go outside, Joyce, I'll see you in a few minutes. And he took this chap to task and told him he had no right to say these sort of things about me. And he said, she's got her living to earn and you've got your living to earn. Now get out and do it. And he went out past me and out into the street and got his tram. And a few days later, I had a summons go to Brunswick Court to have something read out. And that was the finish of that.
Yes.
But they were horrible in some ways.
Joyce, you were saying how some depots were very, in a sense, progressive towards women becoming tram drivers. Some depots were against it.
Yeah.
Have you got a memory there? We're a bit proud, Malcolm and I, that South Melbourne depot, with perhaps Jack Cregan at the helm, was pro-women going driving. I don't know if you've got memories of how Camberwell sat, how Malvern sat on the issue, how Glenn Huntley sat on the issue. In fact, we can go through them one by one if there's sort of, memories there. It might be too big a question to try to ask and remember, but there was this sense that you said to me that different depots reacted in a different way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm trying to pick you up something here. No, I can't read it. It's in.
Any light on the depots at all?
No, only Preston and Essendon were very much against us.
Yes.
In fact, they were downright rude.
Was there any reason for it that some depots were like that and others weren't?
Only because of the union delegates.
So it came down to the union delegates, you think? The character of those?
Yeah. For instance, Jimmy Banks was the union delegate at Essendon then, and he put it around the depots that he wouldn't work behind a woman. She'd have to have balls before he'd work behind a woman.
God. Right, okay.
And I just went over to the depot and I said, I believe we've still got some trouble here. And he stood up and he said, yes, we've got trouble. And he says, and you're it. He said, well, I'll come over to straighten things out. I said, I'm earning my living at Brunswick and you're earning your living here. I said, we've still got to get on together.
Mm-hmm.
And a few days later they had a meeting over there and ironed things out a bit. And he stood down as being union delegate. But,
you were never tempted yourself to be a union delegate?
No. No, I never wanted that job.
Can you remember, were there any women delegates in your time?
Yes, Laurie Manning. And then after her came the girl that went bus driving as well.
Kay Heinrich.
Yes.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Yes, she became the union delegate.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever meet Clary O'Shea?
Yes, many times.
How was Clary? He's also a very strong figure of that era.
Yes, very strong. In fact, he was almost as much for the men for what they were doing as the women.
How do you mean? What do you mean by that?
We had the Risson had the resolution pass, and then he came in and altered it all. And I really and truly think that Risson made them do it.
Yes.
It's hard to say. It's a long while now since it happened.
Yes. Yep.
And they got all the history. I've only got some of it.
Yep.
But it's extraordinary it took so long for there to be a change. It seemed to go on and on.
Oh,
For example, why didn't it first change when you went in? Was it 56 you went to see Risson? Was it 56 you went and see Risson the first time?
yes.
Now, why didn't it change at that time
Because there was too strong a feeling against it.
in the union, but not in management?
No. Never in management. It was always the union.
And why were the unions so opposed? Was it because they didn't want? Was it a job issue that they thought they were?
Yes, they were a job issue.
It was a job issue. They thought they were losing work that way, and the women should be home or something. But they didn't mind them being conductors, though, did they?
No.
There was no great antagonism towards women being conductors. They just didn't want for them to be drivers.
That's right.
Was it because, for example, they didn't want to be a conductor working for a driver? Or it was a driver-driver issue?
I really don't know. I'd have to go into that one.
On another question, on the trams, was the conductor in charge of the tram or the driver in your time? Because conductors were traditionally told they were in charge of the tram, and the driver had to sort of do what the conductor wanted to do because they were in control of the passengers. But drivers always think it's the driver who's in charge of the tram. What was your opinion?
Well, I think it was the driver had to obey the conductor's signal. See, you get an emergency bell, you'd have to pull up your tram almost stone dead. And they were responsible.
Yes. I used to have one driver who would just ignore the bells. He would take off when he felt like it. He would stop when he felt like it. And people would be half in and out, half in out the doors. Some of them would be on the stops, their bags would be outside. He would take off and people would be half on and half in.
What did you do about him?
He took no notice. Oh, we would go to the union delegate, nothing would happen. That was the sort of person he was. Did you ever have any such drivers?
Yes, 2 of them. Yes, so they were considered to be eccentrics.
Dangerous. But it was often very difficult to get rid of the poor drivers.
You couldn't get rid of them.
Yes, they were protected in many ways. Did the union delegate or whatever try to retrain them? Was there that avenue that if a driver was not driving well or driving badly, progressively becoming worse, was there a way of retraining them? Because
I think so.
Refreshers.
Yes, we used to do that in South, didn't we?
Yeah, you had a refresher course. Yep.
Because some of them just took off.
Yes.
Like they take off or they slam the brakes on.
Joyce, because we're probably coming close to finishing here, where the Z-Class trams, you saw the phase of the new model tram, the orange trams, you saw the phase of the brown uniform. Did you get dressed in brown at all? Did you?
I got dressed into green.
As well? So you worked up until, what, 1984, 85 or something?
No, wasn't as long as that. I think we were given the green uniform because they were made and they didn't want to make any more brown ones.
Yes.
That's what I think about it.
What did you think of those Z-Class trams?
Colossal.
You like them?
Yes. I think they were very good.
What was it about them that you liked?
Their smoothness. You had control of the tram by the crowd all sitting down or getting to the inside of the tram. I'd say the smoothness of the tram more than anything else. But it wasn't because of the tram being absolutely new. It was because of the tram being newer but being more steady.
Now tell me, what sort of driver were you known as? Were you known as being a fast driver, a slow driver, a careful driver?
I'd have to go back and ask somebody that.
I think she'd be known as the first woman driver.
No,
Mel.
well, how did you like to drive? How would you say that you like to drive? Did you like to drive fast? Did you like to drive smoothly?
Let's put it this way, going up along St Kilda Road, a man got off at the barracks and ran round the front of the tram and said, "Good driving, love." And that was it. But they more or less made it that you enjoyed what you were doing. That's about the only way I can put it.
Yeah, some drivers took a real pride in being able to do a smooth, fast stop, but a smooth, they took off smoothly so that people didn't fall back, whatever. They took real pleasure in their driving.
We thank Joyce Barry. Thanks, Joyce, for coming into the exhibition today. It's been an absolute pleasure to take you through. And Malcolm Just, the tram poet, and we really appreciate it. So thanks, folks. Signing off here from the Immigration Museum, an interview with Joyce Barry, Melbourne's first woman tram driver.